Good afternoon, all. I'm Georgi Ganov, and I'm the head of pharmacovigilance at the European Medicines Agency. If we move on to the outline of my presentation, I firstly would like to highlight that COVID-19 vaccination campaign is the largest ever, and based on the wealth of information that we have received and evaluated, the safety profile of COVID-19 vaccines remains very reassuring. In the next 15 minutes, I will provide a high-level overview of safety monitoring of COVID-19 vaccines. Moving on to the next slide, let me start with a brief reminder as to why do we need to monitor safety after approval. All medicines, including vaccines, have benefits and risks. As with any mass vaccination campaign, issues might arise that have not been identified in clinical trials. As regulators, we need to detect those, act swiftly, and communicate in full transparency. To manage these exceptional circumstances, additional resources are being mobilized to closely monitor safety. Moving on to the next slide. Here, one of the main pillars of safety monitoring is review of suspected side effects reported by patients and healthcare professionals. Anybody can report, and all reports are sent to EudraVigilance, our European database of suspected side effects. I would like to use this opportunity to express our gratitude to all that took the time to submit to EudraVigilance this important information to allow us to closely monitor the safety of COVID-19 vaccines. On the next slide, you could see the impressive size of the vaccination campaign, both in terms of doses administered, that you can see in the green bubbles, but also the wealth of information we have received. It is essential to understand that reports from patients and healthcare professionals describe medical events that have occurred following vaccination, which doesn't necessarily mean that they've been caused by the vaccine. Those could very well be caused by other health conditions that have occurred in temporal association to the use of the vaccine. It is also important to put the numbers of suspected side effects in the context of how many people have been vaccinated and for how long. Moving on to the next slide. Let's take the key question: do COVID-19 vaccine remain safe? The safety of vaccine is continuously monitored. COVID-19 vaccines with over 589 million doses administered continue to show a very reassuring safety profile. As with all medicines, side effects do occur, but these are usually mild, are outweighed by far by the benefits that vaccines bring against severe disease and death. Let's move on to the next slide. Let's focus our attention on a few examples of risks detected and managed post-approval. Our pharmacovigilance system has been particularly efficient in detecting and managing new safety issues. EU was at the forefront of dealing with the very rare side effects of unusual blood clots with low blood platelets, the so-called thrombosis and thrombocytopenia syndrome, or TTS. We have detected earlier the risk and managed the risk for Vaxzevria, and we have been proactive in dealing with the risk for Janssen and acted even before the vaccine was rolled out in the EU. It is important to note that TTS cases remain very rare, and at the bottom of this slide, I draw your attention to symptoms to be aware of post-vaccination to detect early this very rare condition. Let's move on to another example of safety issue on the next slide, detected and managed. This relates to myocarditis post-vaccination with mRNA vaccines, which occurs in very rare cases, and it is observed primarily in the 14 days after vaccination, more often after the second dose and more often in younger male. It's important to know that the course of this condition is generally mild and responds very well to treatment. When discussing risks, it is important to put those in the context of benefits that vaccination provides in terms of preventing hospitalization and death. For this particular condition, we should also note that COVID-19 itself can cause myocarditis. And if we consider for children and adolescents, the risk that COVID causes, that Marco described earlier, the so-called MIS, multi-system inflammatory syndrome, we should know that this condition can also cause myocarditis as a result of COVID, among other serious complications. Let's move on to the next slide. We as regulators are committed to continuously monitor the benefits and risk of vaccines. And so how do we look at reports? A scientific assessment looks at the suspected side effects in the context of the person's individual case to determine if it may be caused by the vaccine or it might have occurred for other reasons. Side effects assessed in the context of all available data on the vaccines, and this could include clinical trials, other studies, and the scientific literature. We draw science-based conclusions on the benefits and the risk and could take a number of different actions if these are warranted. Let's move on to the next slide. Unfortunately, we have seen a lot of misinformation circulating online, including posts in social media misappropriating our logo and providing inaccurate information. So it is very important to get the facts right and refer to reliable sources of information, such as the websites of medicine regulators. So on our website, we have medicine overview addressing questions and answers in lay language. We publish the risk management plans, which describe how safety data is collected and how risk can be mitigated. And we have recommendations and precautions for the safe and effective use of each approved vaccine. For healthcare professionals, this can be found in the summary of product characteristics, and for patients in the package leaflet. Furthermore, if we move to the next slide, we publish on a monthly basis safety updates, which contain the main outcomes from the PRAC latest safety assessment and inform of what new information will be added to the product information, as well as updates on assessments of new safety data, overall information on how safety is monitored, and some background information on the vaccines. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, in addition to reports we review on a very intensive basis in reports submitted in EudraVigilance, as well as studies requested to the vaccine manufacturers and careful review of all published scientific literature, we have commissioned independent EMA studies which allow us to quickly generate background rates and support prompt evaluation of any arising new safety concerns. So moving to the next slide. In the context of COVID-19, we have seen and we have benefited from a very intense collaboration with other regulators. We have used established frameworks and have set up new ones in order to exchange promptly information, to get access to worldwide data, and also to use assessments from other regulators and expertise. Let's move on to the next slide. In conclusion, let me highlight the main points. COVID-19 is the largest vaccine campaign ever, and the safety profile of the vaccines remains very reassuring. A strong EU pharmacovigilance system is in place. Safety is our priority and will not be compromised. Unprecedented efforts have been made to manage high volume of safety information. Very rare side effects, some serious, have been detected quickly, assessed promptly, and acted upon. And this has been supported by continuous transparency and communication to the public. We have enhanced tools for safety monitoring and frameworks for risk communication and quite intensive international collaboration. COVID-19 vaccine safety is stronger with your participation. Please continue to report suspected side effects. That ends my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. With that, I will pass to the next speaker.